Hey, everybody. Welcome back to Disclosures with Nick and Dave. I am your host, Nick Offenkamp, along with my wonderful co-host, David Miller. How's it going, dude?
Good. Had a busy couple weeks here.
It has. It's really picked up in good ways. I'm grateful for that.
Yeah, it is something to be grateful for, given that it seems like the local market has swung down a little bit. Days on market are up, and inventory isn't moving as quick as I think everyone would like it to.
Yeah, no doubt. Whether you're a real estate professional or a home seller, it has felt like it's been a very sluggish spring, summer market. And there's a lot of different factors in that, with interest rates being what they are, with the geopolitical situation, with midterm elections coming up. I think there's a lot of people that are just like buyers that are kind of like, ooh, I don't know, sitting on the sidelines.
It could be that, or it could be your house just needs some updates.
It could be. Wow. Are you trying to segue us into a...
You see how I did that setup there?
I appreciate that. That was really smooth. I tell you what, we're getting close to 10 episodes, and all of a sudden we finally figuring out some transitions. Well done, my friend.
It's okay. It's early enough that the episode can still go off the rails. So
yeah.
Don't hold your breath.
Stay to the end to find out just how off the rails this whole thing goes. Yeah. Everyone likes watching a train wreck. You transitioned excellently, and that is what we're wanting to chat about. Last week's episode was, how do you price a home? That's an important question that as real estate professionals we get asked quite a bit. And an adjacent question to that is, okay, before I list my home, what kind of updates should I do? Do I need to do? That's something that we get asked all the time. And similar to the pricing conversation, where frustratingly for some people, perhaps, the answer is, well, how we price your home really depends on what sort of strategy and approach you're wanting to take and what your circumstances are. Well, in a lot of ways, the answer to what you should do to prep your home really depends. And it also really depends on your agent. And I think that even you and I might have some disagreements on the things that need to be done, ought to be done. And it's where a lot of the value, I think, is in having us help people work it out.
Yeah, it's micro context and it's also macro context, and that's where having an agent that knows your local market and knows what is on the market and what's for sale at what price really starts to make a difference. You know, that CMA piece, that the broker opinion of price that local agents give when, someone wants to sell their house. It makes a big difference if we're talking a new construction house in a relatively new subdivision, or if we're talking a 70s neighborhood in an older subdivision, or even if we're getting further back into historic neighborhoods. If you could draw the line arbitrarily, I'd say the 1950s and back. The age of the house is going to play a huge role in what type of updates need to be done, if we're talking primarily cosmetic or major mechanical systems. So there's just a lot to unpack with the type of updates you might want that are really surface level and cosmetic, might move the needle, they might not. And if we're talking an older home that needs major mechanical or structural type major systems, the exterior, the siding, the roofing, all those sorts of things. And so you would need to, those things could really hurt the sale of the home. So that's what we're going to be going through.
And maybe to make that really objective for folks, is just take the Evergreen Highway neighborhood, old Evergreen Highway, where you've got a lot of housing stock that's from the 1970s and 1980s, and where certain updates could actually have a swing on the valuation of the home by potentially a few $100,000, maybe even more, where there's some really, really nice, beautiful custom builds that are new down there. There's some homes that have been updated really beautifully, and there's some that haven't been touched since 1977. And depending on what's been done, I mean, it can add crazy value to the house versus a neighborhood like a lot of the new construction that's in Ridgefield, where a bunch of neighborhoods have all been built up since 2020. And it's like, yeah, you could put hundreds of thousands of dollars into the home and it might move the valuation by 10%. You might get see a $50,000 to $60,000 bump, but you're just not going to have the same return because of those neighborhood dependencies.
Yep.
So that context matters a ton. As we frame up this conversation, I think that there's really two different types of improvements or investments that you might want to make in your home before listing. These two categories that we'd make recommendations in. One is defensive and the other would be offensive. You feel like that's a fair way to...
Yeah, so maybe to define that a little bit better.
Yeah.
If we're saying defensive, that we're talking about repairs or updates that need to be done, like we said, major mechanical systems, say a roof that's near the end of its life. Maybe if you have really worn siding, if we want to get really into the weeds here, my history working back in Minneapolis is in really old houses. And so you see it less here in Clark County, but there are a couple neighborhoods closer to downtown Vancouver where maybe you could be looking at foundation issues. Out here, there could be major concerns for earthquake prevention and seismic retrofit. All these sorts of things that can become real barriers to the sale of a home, both from the psychological standpoint of a buyer not wanting to buy a house that they think might fall over if there's a mid-level earthquake, all the way down to it becomes difficult to get insurance on these properties and insurance and or loan underwriting.
Right.
So those would fall into the bucket we're calling defensive, right? Like we're trying to maximize the audience who this home appeals to, because if you have enough of those major issues stack up, you're really limiting yourself to a cash buyer or an investment buyer, and so that can really hurt the sale of your home if you don't get it to let's just call it 95% of the comparable homes for sale that are around it.
Yeah, and I think that this is important to, like, of course, we're recording this in August of 2026. And so, as we mentioned right at the start of the episode, like housing affordability is really tough right now. And this will play it, like this is a theme throughout the entire conversation. But the number of deals that are falling out of contract during the inspection period is at like a record high. And so to avoid getting your home under contract, going pending, and then having the buyer back out during inspections, there are defensive moves that you may want to make, addressing things that aren't traditionally considered sexy, like the cosmetic fixes, but the things that actually keep your home under contract. So I think, you spelled those out really well. These are your roof, your mechanical systems, sometimes electrical panels, all of that stuff that just an inspector's going to easily flag. And unfortunately, these usually tend to be pretty big ticket items. Yeah. Right.
So defensive on one side, and we'll dig into both these sides a little more, but then offensive, how are we defining offensive?
Yeah. So with the offensive, it really is like how are you going to wow a buyer and create that emotional connection? Very few people pull up to a house and look at the roof and are like, I love it. I want to have it just because of the color of shingles or whatever. It's usually things like the exterior paint and the landscaping that create that first impression. And then moving inside of the home, the quality of the flooring and hard surfaces. Have there been updates to the key living areas like the kitchen and bathrooms? Those are the sort of things where you're really trying to make a amazing first impression on a buyer and drive emotional value that way. What would you add to that?
Yeah, so I'd say it is. It's trying to capture interest in it. It's trying to make sure you're at the height of everything that is trendy. You know, to put it roughly. And there is a bit of a, you know, you could put most buyers into say 80 or 90% category that are going to gravitate towards whatever's trendy because it's kind of human nature. We like what is what's hot, what we see everyone else doing around us, and so you know the whole new construction industry is based around this idea, right, of continuing to push forward the trends, and they have you know, voting on all this, and it feels like it's kind of just a cycle that repeats every 20 or so years of the hot paint colors and you know, the hot tile finishes and material finishes. And so if you're really behind, if a home is really behind in that could be that could more fall into the defensive side, but more often than not, that's not going to be the, if your paint color is a little off, that's not going to be the major the driver for the purchase of your home. But maybe if your house feels really fresh and crisp and like it's not dated, that's going to command a higher price. There's going to be a lot more desire for that,
right?
Because of the emotional connection people feel with, oh, this feels like what I'm seeing on the internet and on all the renovation shows and anywhere else people consume what they start to think of. And then to maybe put the cap on it, I would say there is sort of a maybe 10% of the market that is really interested in something very specific, something very niche. And you know, it is funny because you do see these properties that are I don't know if eccentric is the right word, just wacky paint, what I would consider a wacky paint scheme throughout the whole house, and just really interesting. And those properties do still sell, but there's just a lot. They're harder to sell because there's a lot smaller market for them.
Yeah. And maybe the practical way of thinking through the difference between offensive and defensive is HGTV shows are going to focus far more on the offensive changes. You're not going to see long extended segments on HGTV about the different types of windows and the selection process for which windows to put into the house versus what you're going to see. And even sometimes like the structural sort of changes that minor structural changes that you can make to a home, often more offensive than defensive, because while it might enhance the livability of the home, it doesn't change whether the home is inhabitable or not, whether or not you can get a mortgage for it, whether or not the appraiser is going to flag it.
Yeah.
So, all right, that's probably good in terms of just like setting these things up. So let's just take, for like example, 1997 home that's all original, everything. It's in a great neighborhood. It was 97 when these original owners bought it. So they bought it for, probably less than $100,000. Let's just say it's in Fisher's Landing.
Hopefully.
You know, they probably paid $75,000, $80,000 for it. And now there are comps that are selling for closer to $600,000, $650,000, depending on condition. And so that's your situation. You come to us and ask about, all right, we haven't done anything to this home in the 30 years or so that we've owned it. What should we do?
Well, so the the first thing we're going to look at is going to be what updates have already been done when we walk into the house. And the first ones we're really going to consider are going to be those defensive items we talked about, the really obvious ones, the things that are going to hold up the sale. So I already mentioned a couple of them. We got, your roof, your water heater, your furnace. In a lot of cases, checking to make sure that there's no major water ingress, anything that could have damaged the mold.
Really
Yes,
big one out here.
Mold, and any wood eating insects. Not so much
not too
out
much,
here,
but pests and those kinds of things.
Yeah, the major psychological things that are both going to deter a buyer, but also maybe from a material standpoint hold up the sale, the loan process and the appraisal. And so I think that's a big one to go over right now, is the appraisal. And it depends a little bit on which market segment you're in, but something important to know is that if we're talking FHA or VA financing, in previous episodes we've talked a little bit about how those loan products have extra rules and verifications on them because they're considered inherently more risky to the lender.
They're government backed, right? And so the government's going to protect their investment and backing with a more stringent appraisal process.
Yes. And so let's just say the roof on this 29-year-old house is original, and it's asphalt shingle roof. It's not tile or metal roof. So 29 years, you're well past life on a roof. And so the rule that most appraisers for FHA and VA are going to look at is if the roof is 2 years, if it has 2 years or less of remaining life, they're more than likely going to require that roof be replaced in order for the home to be funded with an FHA loan. Mm-hmm. Right. So this now comes into a question of price or your speed that you need to move and who your buyer segment is. If 600, which now is 650, I don't know if it's fair to say that that's starting. It feels like with everything getting inflated, 650 is getting closer to a starter home in Clark County.
Certainly in Fisher's Landing.
Yeah, you can find something cheaper. But so the question that would be a real question we would ask our buyers is, or we would also ask ourselves is, do we think that the segment here is likely to be a VA or an FHA loan, and how much demand for the house is there? That I would say even in some conventional lenders, if a roof was actually, in this example we're making up, 29 years old, I could even, I don't know if you've seen it. I've seen not specifically a roof, but other major issues in a house hold up a conventional loan too, where they actually had to do,
true. Especially if there's like moisture in the crawl space or, anything that the appraiser flags and that the underwriters look at and say, oh, like if this is a real issue and persists for the next couple of years, the value of this home is going to decrease precipitously.
Yeah. And that's if it hasn't been clear in what we're talking about, in the sort of the defensive category, the majority of it is a hold up from a lending perspective. Or is that safe to say that on the defensive side?
Either lending or that the buyer, even if the lender were to approve it, like let's just say it's a conventional loan and the lender says, yeah, that's fine, that the roof is at the end of the life, that the buyer looks at it and says, okay, sure, but as soon as I close on this home within the next year or so, I'm going to need to finance or budget for a whatever $20,000, $25,000, $30,000 roof project.
Sure. Do you think it is, what percentage would you put to buyer hesitancy versus appraisal when we're talking defensive major
Yeah.
major renovation
I think
items.
you're right to recognize that, like, it really does depend on who the target market. Anytime that we're working with a seller, we have kind of an ideal client profile in mind for who this house is most likely going to appeal to. And so, yeah, if we think that based upon community, neighborhood, price point, it's more likely to appeal to first-time buyers or people that would be looking at government loans, then there's certain recommendations that we'll probably make defensively based upon the appraisal type. But especially in this market, at least my sense is these defensive moves, I weight them more heavily on just how do we not lose a buyer while they're under contract during inspections, where some surprise comes up and the buyer says, shoot, that's going to be another $20,000, $30,000, or you combine these things and they get overwhelmed by that big number. And then as a seller too, you get frustrated because you feel like either A, you're losing the deal, or B, you're getting hammered hard on additional credits or purchase price reduction during that inspection period.
Yeah. Yeah, that's interesting. I think another aspect when we're thinking about positioning also has to do with, specifically in Clark County, how much new construction is around the home, right? And that's going back to the micro and the macro piece of like zooming out a little bit, and what you just mentioned about the sale price of the home, and people, you alluded to it earlier, that how people are reaching for housing and nobody wants to get stuck with a $30,000 roof after they close on the purchase of a new home. And so if we're talking, let's say if you're in a really high demand area like Fisher's Landing, and you have a lot of your competition has the same issues going on, where maybe most of the housing stock in any given neighborhood you're looking for has worn out roofs. Well, if just down the road there's a new subdivision that has all brand new houses that aren't going to have any of these issues, to really compete with them, you can't come to market with a house that is going to need a roof replacement unless you price it accordingly.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. So talk to me about just how that strategy goes. And I know that this starts to get back into like how we price a home, the previous episode, but.
And these two episodes have been positioned next to each other, partially because it is they're not independent of each other, right? Like it is a give and pull, and I think from what we've seen with our clients is that the main driving factor has to do, well, I'd say it's twofold. It's how much work the client wants to do to get the house ready, and what's their timeline.
Sure.
You lining up a roof replacement is not a small feat to do it, to do a good due diligence. If you're fortunate enough to know somebody or have an existing relationship, then in a lot of cases, it'd be a no-brainer. But if you don't really know anyone and you have to interview 3 contractors and they don't know you're not going to get any priority. I mean, if you're looking to make a quick sale, that could take you.
It could easily be a month.
Yeah, I was going to say a month to 2 just to have the house done and ready to go to market, and also permitting and inspections. There's just a lot of factors to doing a project of that scale, and so. Not to get too far off track, there are other, your water heater, your furnace, these other things that are maybe a little bit easier from a timing perspective. And I suppose to a certain degree, how complex the project is really determines the payouts you're going to get. Yeah. The roof, if it's in bad shape, is going to hurt you a lot. But if it's brand new, it's going to help you a lot. To a lesser degree, your furnace, which is less costly, well, in most cases, it would be less than your average roof. it is going to hurt you, but it's not going to hurt you as much.
Sure.
So
Yeah, it's kind of relative to the size and scope of the project. And I think that it's important on this note that with these defensive items, one of the sort of bummers is that very rarely do you get like a full return on the investment. So let's just say that you are putting on a $30,000 roof. We would not typically say that that's going to add $30,000 of value to the home. It might add 20, 25, but it's rarely ever going to be a one-for-one return. That's going to be the same typically on HVAC systems. Really, most of the stuff that's behind the wall is not super cosmetic. And so that's where a lot of home sellers hesitate, because they're like, why would I spend $100 only to get $85 back? And so to your point earlier, that we can have the conversation about like, okay, well, if you recognize that the roof is shot, like we've got to price the cost of a roof replacement in, unless it's some really unique circumstances. But typically, we'd say that. But you are going to lose out on a potential buyer pool. You're going to, even if you priced it in that way, with VA or FHA inspections, you may have to replace the roof anyway. You may lose the buyer, or there may be other buyers that they love the house, but they're not going to make an offer because they don't want to have to deal with the project of a roof. And so it's like, all right, you might not get 100% return on your investment, but you're going to significantly reduce the objections to your home, which then increases the likelihood of a successful sale and typically accelerates the timeline for that sale process pretty significantly.
So would it be safe to say that you're hedging against being stuck on market and sort of dying in the stale listing pool? Is that a good way to think about it? Is you're buying a quick sale, which not to get too far out of the scope of what we're talking about today, but that really is what ends up hurting. Like, you can have to price cut 30 grand in a hurry in a hard market, right? And maybe if your reference point for the market has just been the last 5 years when it's been a really strong seller's market, it's like, yeah, well, you can kind of get away with this stuff. I think as we open the show up with talking about how the market's slowing down a little bit, I think these things are starting to matter. I know the more the market swings to a buyer's market, the more these defensive items really start to make a difference.
Yeah. I mean, so let's just say you've got two identical, like 1997 homes, and for all intents and purposes, like they're the exact same floor plan and they have the exact same updates, but one has the original roof and one has a brand new roof. And the one with the brand new roof is listed at $600. The one with the original roof is listed at $585. Which one do you think is going to sell first?
Probably the one with the new roof.
Yeah, I think so. I think that the $15,000 price difference is going to be worth it to the buyer to have the new. And even if the one were to go down to $575, like the convenience and certainty of like, hey, the roof is done, it's been signed off on, hopefully there's some transferable warranties, but especially in this market, like that peace of mind and just having a move-in ready home that doesn't have these big scary defensive items, replacements, that seems to mean a lot to buyers in this particular moment.
Yeah. Maybe a little helpful note as sellers are maybe thinking about this. This, it's already hard to want to dump money into a house you're planning on getting rid of, but I would put a caveat, the note being that if you're going to do any of these major repairs, you really want to get a reputable company, somebody who's known locally. Like, now is not the time to GC your own,
Yeah.
find a sub crew that can roof your house. And then if they do it wrong, they're in the wind, or to not pull a permit. Those are the things that are going to get noticed. And in a lot of cases, we're not talking about flippers today, but most people can see and tell if something was done in a really fast,
Fast and cheap. Yeah.
poorly done way, where in a lot of cases that could be almost your worst outcome, because you've in maybe roofs isn't the best example, but certainly when you're talking interior remodels and mechanical systems, something that's really easy for a buyer to see. Like if it looks and feels like any Joe Blow did the work and there's not much confidence there, that can actually be your worst outcome, right? That you got somebody to do it half price, but your end result, your end product instills less confidence than if it had just been not updated to begin with.
Right.
So
yeah, I've seen, I'm smiling because I've seen some like tiling jobs that were like, yeah, I'm pretty sure they made it worse.
Yeah. Right.
And maybe this is a good sort of transition point from the defensive spend, which I think we're largely on the same page on, of just that it's like, we're going to make a lot of defensive recommendations of, hey, these are the things that are liable to cause your deal to fall out of contract, whether from appraisal or inspection. It's going to be worth spending the money to just have greater certainty and speed in selling your home. But on the offensive side, I think that this is where there's a lot more variability.
Yeah, what was the initial thought you were having? So we're talking variability. We're saying we've defined it as primarily cosmetic updates, right? So I guess let's pick up with our example. It's a 29-year-old house. It's surrounded by 29-year-old houses. What are we envisioning? Let's paint the picture for the
So exactly. And it's a nice established neighborhood. And let's just say about half of the houses have been updated within the past 10 years. By updated, we mean full kitchen remodels, maybe some light structural modifications to the home to open up the floor plan, paint. Like those are the kinds of things that have in mind. And so we have sellers that will ask, like, oh, should we replace the countertops or refinish the cabinetry if we haven't done anything with it in close to 30 years? A lot of times with bathrooms, there's questions about like, and the tub shower combo is looking rough and has gone out of style, especially in the primary bathroom, or the tile countertops for the bath, like the sink and vanity. Like, do those things need to be replaced? And this is where it can get a lot more tricky to discern. One, what's the relative return on investment going to be? And two, how do you make selections that are not just according to your taste, but that are actually, to your point earlier, about like a trendy choice that is going to appeal to the vast majority of buyers in the market today? And that's something that I think requires both a lot of judgment on what's worth it, and then two, real taste, which taste is taste because not everybody has it.
Yeah, well, not everybody has it, but back to the earlier point of it is also a subjective thing.
Sure.
And I think that's why it's helpful to think about roughly 90% of the population falls into this category that their taste is formed primarily by what they see currently, in the places they consume information and media about
the
houses.
Magnolia
Yeah,
magazines and the
you're always if you're not really paying attention and you don't interact with this all the time, you might not even really understand that all these trends are just trickling down from these designers and these magazines and all these other places. That's how the industry works, and it is funny how some markets lag, and then it always feels like a game of catch up to some degree. But I guess the point I was putting in there was just to note that there is still going to be that 10% that wants the burgundy,
Sure.
the burgundy room with the shag blackout curtains, and
yeah. Taste is subjective, and that is a taste.
Yes, it is. So it is, let's, if you could say that example of the really eccentric house that exists, the cost to say even just do surface level updates, if the whole house is like that. And I guess maybe I'm latching onto this a little too much because I've been in so many of these houses in my career of like, man, just to get this to like a sort of average finish that is going to apply universally to most buyer profiles. I mean, you could be talking $50,000 or $100,000 in a 3,000 square foot house just to kind of.
If you're replacing carpet and flooring and repainting most of the interior walls.
And so it would be my opinion that in a lot of cases, you're going to be better off just trying to find that eccentric buyer than to dump $100,000 into a prospective house. Because so often it seems that when a house has that much personal touch, if you could frame it a different way, even just repainting and new carpet could be really hard. Like you're kind of brushing into a full scale renovation at that point.
Sure.
Which I guess interestingly, maybe we should just share some of the facts about these surface level. We say surface level, but the modest, is that fair to call it? We're calling it a modest kitchen update. So back to our example house, and before we get any further off track, if you did a modest kitchen remodel, and market to market it's going to vary, but let's just say a $30,000 kitchen remodel, some more basic cabinets, getting rid of, no hate on the golden oak people from the 90s, but
it's coming back though, man. But
I like it on floors, but I don't know. I don't know if the cabinets,
so much stuff about the honey oak.
Honey oak's back. No, but if you swapped it out for something a little more standard now, a little more trendy, even something, if you could use the term basic,
sure. A nice white painted, white finish,
something
cabinet,
that feels
just classic,
feels bright and classic. Exactly. Typically, you see around 115% ROI. So you're not losing any money on that. And like as we're going through some of these numbers, just keep in mind that we're talking, these are averages. It is still possible to lose money on a kitchen remodel if you make the wrong choices. And I think that was back to your point of it does take a discerning eye and choice and style. And
just because it's new doesn't necessarily mean that it adds value. But I mean, to just put real numbers on it. So like if you spent $30,000 to have either the cabinetry refinished or repainted, if you put in a new kitchen sink with a new faucet, maybe change out all of the hardware on the cabinetry to make that more modern, and then maybe even just some simple appliance upgrades.
Yeah.
You could spend $30,000. Sounds like a lot of money, but we're using cost versus value. This is a big report that's put out by Zonda, and they do it market by market. So looking at the Portland market, they see that there's 115% return based upon appraisal data. So you spend $30,000, you get $34,500 in value added to the home at resale. And again, a lot of that's just because the buyer comes in and they see, wow, might not have been everything that I would have chosen, but this kitchen feels nice and fresh. I can live in this from day one and don't feel like I've got to do anything to it right away.
A major renovation, something that's, it feels like a sore. A point of contention. You're walking in and it's bothering the new owner of the house. It doesn't feel good.
Yeah, and it's more than just the dollars. It's also just the time and inconvenience and having to find contractors and go however many weeks it is where you've got a kitchen that feels like a construction, which is all the same things that as a seller, you feel like the resistance to making these kind of changes. But if you really care about returning maximum, like return on investment and selling, like that's a great area to spend the money. Now, the problem is one, even at that modest kitchen remodel, if you make the wrong selections, go way too dark on your cabinetry, choose some sort of like a really odd, cheap looking quartz, like those things can absolutely hurt you. The other way that you can go wrong is that you spend $130,000 on a kitchen remodel, which is not hard to do, especially if you're going to change cabinetry layout, have to redo plumbing and electrical and pull permits and a bunch of that stuff. Once you start to get into the territory of a major kitchen remodel, that cost versus value guide and survey shows that actually you only get about half back. Like it's a 50% return on investment. So there's a balancing act there for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. And so I hear the comment already coming. Well, if that's the case, why do flippers do it? Why is there flippers in the business? And I guess there's a couple points. The first would be, I'd say here in Clark County, there's actually not a ton of flippers because the margins in the last 5 years, the initial sale price of the price at which a flipper can get the home is become a lot higher than maybe it was between 2010 and 2020, and the price of material has gone up. But in general, the retort I would give to that is, flippers are making their money primarily on the purchase of the home initially, and they're also making their money on the fact that they have working relationships with professionals where they get a better price on the work to be done. So if you're someone who's handy and you have an old house and you're like, hey, I can do a lot of this myself, that could be a real area where you could get all the benefits of doing the renovation, but not pay the premium of having a professional do it. Now, I once again, I would preface the work still has to be done well, but that is a real area. But if you've seen like, oh, these flippers, they came in and they did all this, coming from that background, that would be the main thing to flag would be, if you're watching HGTV, I can tell you whatever number they put up for the bathroom, like it's never close, right? Like that, what these things actually cost in reality versus what they cost on TV is.
Gosh,
there's a real disparity there.
One of the more, I don't know if they're filming, so I don't know how old it is, but I saw one of the Chip and Joanna Gaines Fixer Upper episodes, and they were replacing like 15 windows in a house, and their budget for it, I think
$4,000.
It was something ridiculously low like that. Like I think it was about 16. It was coming out to about $1,000 a window.
Yep.
And it's like, in no world, is that even remotely close. You're probably looking at 4 to 5 times that at minimum.
Yeah, like a base level cheap window is going to be kind of starting at $500 an opening just for the cost of the window. And then, that's to say nothing about the cost of install, which is going to change market to market. But, the point being, if you're sitting here and you're thinking, gosh, it seems like people are making all this money flipping houses, more often than not, I'd actually say the biggest the biggest factor that makes a flipper successful is the initial purchase price. And a lot of the time, these guys are getting houses very cheap off market because they're going down let's call them non-standard avenues. They're looking at foreclosure reports, tax delinquency, all sorts of ways these guys source these deals. But if that's what your perception is, you sort of have to readjust for
Right.
What reality is. And the other thing I would say is a recommendation I would have is anything that's a multifaceted renovation project, that's where you really should start to be careful. Just because that sort of stuff, like a kitchen remodel, a bathroom remodel, very easily overruns cost.
Yep.
If you're getting your roof, a quote for your roof being replaced, it's a much more straightforward project. Like, are there things that could come up? I say that, and then I think back to all the times of like, you're re-roofing a house that was built in 1900 and it has what's called skipboard sheeting. And so then they have to resheet the roof. It's like stuff like that comes up. But in general, re-roofing a house, it's like, okay, what the price they give you is what it's going to be. But a lot of people may somewhat naively enter into a kitchen remodel and they think, you gave me a price for 25, and they have this picture in their mind of what they're going to get. And then reality is $25,000 doesn't get them nearly as much as they want. So on the more cosmetic updates, there can be ROI there. You have to make the right decisions. And to some extent, you should either really have someone you know and trust, or really know what you're doing if you're going to be obtaining multiple bids. And the same would go for bathroom remodels also.
Yeah.
Anything.
And we take a pretty minimalistic approach, I would say. Like the concerns about costs running over, those concerns increase exponentially once you're having to pull permits, move plumbing, move electrical. If there's anything where you're having to open up walls, it just creates more and more opportunity for other issues to be discovered, which maybe you think, it could get discovered anyway in an inspection, but we want to reduce the risk of creating more issues and more headaches in prepping a home for listing. So it really is just, okay, what are the few things that we can do that would actually have a return on investment and actually capture more buyer attention, create that emotional connection, which generally is going to be light touch, like refinishing things. We're not doing big layout changes, maybe some light landscaping to make sure that there's nothing that looks dead, or basically when somebody walks out into the backyard, this is where people can way overdo it too on landscaping. When somebody walks out into the backyard, most of the time, the experience that you want them to have is, wow, this looks like a really peaceful and great place to hang out. Not, wow, this looks like a huge project, which could be because it's a really crappy backyard that needs a lot of work, or because it's so over landscaped that it looks like I'm either going to have to be a part-time gardener or hire
sharpen up your hedging shears.
Yeah. So, there's it's just crazy how you can fall off on either side, and that's really where we're here to help people, is just finding that golden mean of, hey, here's where the investments and improvements are actually worth it. Here's the ones that you really ought to do, and here's everything that you just don't want to touch.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's good. Maybe to try to wrap it up here, maybe two things. We hit them with a couple of the things that are consistently have high ROI, and they're kind of interesting, right? And they have a lot to do with the initial curb appeal, right?
Yeah.
Some of the future buyer is pulling up to your house, and they walk up and they're looking at it, and they're seeing, in most cases, if we're talking a 90s house, the garage door and the front door.
Yeah.
Which,
especially here in Vancouver.
Incidentally,
big old garage doors.
got to have your RV or your boat or your toy, right? It's good. But so incidentally, those two items are oftentimes some of the highest ROI things that can be updated.
Yeah. What do they say on a garage door? It's like close to
260%. Yeah.
Yeah.
Which maybe that's just a gap for the garage door industry there. They need to raise the prices. But
Sure.
To that point, that's something you can take and file away in the back of your head of like, oh, if you do a really nice job painting an older garage door, that can really update the appeal.
Yeah.
And the same with the front door. I mean, front doors, they get a lot of abuse. They can be the paint can be beat up, the finish can be faded, or maybe it's just kind of an older, pretty basic looking, ugly front door. And if you
It's crazy. Like, I can't tell you how many times I have gone to show a house and the door is like 30 plus years old and the lock hardly works. And I'm like struggling to get the client inside. And it creates such an awful first impression of what the home is like, how it's been cared for. I mean, and front doors relative to everything that you could do to improve your house is not that expensive. And it's something that it increases that initial curb appeal. It increases the appeal from the inside of the home. It can help with energy efficiency. I sound like a freaking door salesman right here, but it sends a message about how secure the home is. Like, there's a lot of psychological and what's the word I'm looking for? Anyway, like psychological sort of triggers that are associated with that front door, where it's like, yeah, that's a phenomenal place to put your money.
Yeah. I think it's good, and they constantly update these studies. I remember seeing one back in the day, which was that homes that have real natural hardwood flooring always sell for more. And so in older markets, probably more applicable to Portland than Clark County. Not that there aren't some.
Vancouver,
downtown Vancouver. So often, everyone had heard that study for 10 years. So anytime a house went up for sale, you'd always see, everything else would be left alone, but the hardwood floors would be refinished. So you'd have this house that would have, all this paint, holes in the walls, needed a fresh interior paint. The kitchen was completely dated. Well, and it's a funny deal because people follow these real estate agents and flippers. They follow these trend reports that say what is the most demand, what is the highest demand items in the sale of a home. So maybe that's the real takeaway is keep an eye on that if you're getting ready to sell. And if you're in a home that is a little bit older and could use some updating, press your agent on all right, what are the things you think we need to update? Are there, and hopefully your agent's prompting you with these questions, but look at the majors and don't get surprised on once you're under contract and something comes back like, oh, we didn't really think about the furnace. And, that sounds pretty obvious, but you'd be surprised what gets missed. And then also think, is there any strategic positioning to really try to create that heightened emotional desire for your specific house?
Yeah. And while there are no guarantees in life, it's usually, especially in the situation that we're describing where somebody's been in the home for 20 plus years and has great equity. I mean, this can be a great area to pull some of that equity up front to make the improvements in order to get a higher, quicker, more certain sale, not get beat up nearly as much or risk falling out of contract. Just ultimately having a much better experience that can be really worthwhile investment of your home's equity, or using some of the different financing programs that a lot of the contractors offer, so that you're really just able to pay off all of these projects with the net proceeds from your sale. And as Dave has kind of alluded to, this is something that we love helping people work through. And fortunately, we've been able to develop a lot of relationships with good and reputable contractors and tradespeople to help with these things. So if you you are looking for connection or a referral, or just want an opinion on, hey, what should we do? That's absolutely the kind of thing that Dave and I love to do, whether you're local or not. You can reach out to either of us, and we'll link to the cost versus value guide, since we've referenced that a few times in the show notes. So you can find all those details there. I did want to get your thoughts on one more thing before we sign off, and that is home staging.
Probably should be its own episode, huh?
Yeah, maybe just tease it a little bit here then, just because there's some crazy stats out there from the staging companies that home staging adds.
Grain of salt.
Yeah, what home staging can add, like they say insane, like it's a 312% return on investment because you spend $3 or $4 grand on staging, but it causes your home to sell for 25% more and sells in 73% less time on market.
Yeah. I don't know. I don't know exactly if I'd buy into all the specifics, but in general, I think we're in agreement that staging is, in almost every case, a necessity. Even just as you think about walking through a home, even if the staging sucks, just the fact that there's something in the space, filling the space out, it makes it harder to really, and it sounds a little snaky the way I'm saying it, but it's just part of selling and listing a home, is you're making it harder for everyone, the potential buyers who walk through, to really get a good look at the home. Like, more of the surfaces are covered. There's stuff distracting from, has this floor dipped a little bit? Is there a big hole in the drywall behind the couch? So that's sort of the first, and then the second is just the fact that people are really spatially unaware.
Yeah,
and, like, people have a really hard
so.
time picturing, like, how does a couch fit in here? What does this look like with my dining room table here? And
I think it's because it's so rare that we ever walk into unfinished, unfurnished spaces, right? And so we kind of need those anchoring points that help us feel the size of a room relative to what we're used to. And so by being strategic about placement of couches and tables and beds and the size of those things, it really helps when somebody walks in and they're picturing their own furniture. How is my couch going to fit in this room with my bed and my nightstands? Okay, they've put a king in this one and it fits great. And it just removes the opportunity for them to walk into a space and have their knee-jerk reaction be, it feels small, with no basis other than the fact that they're just going off of purely what they feel. So agreed that the statistics there are probably oversold, but I also have never listed a empty home. I can't see myself doing it because I just think it makes such a significant difference.
Yeah, well, and back to the psychological standpoint of what you're saying about people not walking into houses, it's like, all the houses I've ever walked into, having primarily the investing background, are like major rehab projects, right?
Yeah.
Like, and maybe that's just an association with me, but in general, I think people, unless it's maybe like a new construction home that you're walking in a community, outside of that, I think people have sort of this, most people, if you're not in the industry, you probably don't walk that many empty homes, or you haven't really been in any, but a large, in less so, I'd say, in a smaller townhome, but especially when you get into a 2,000 or 3,000 square foot home, there's really just sort of an emptiness that's there. It's kind of a hard feeling to describe, but it doesn't feel like home. It doesn't.
I would describe it as sad.
Yeah, just a sadness in the bones. Yeah. No, but it very much is. There's a psychological lump to get over there, and I think there's an association with bad. Just a negativity. No one likes the idea of an empty home. It feels uninviting, and I think too the fact that most people associate sort of that emptiness of the home with properties that need to be rehabbed or
Distressed.
distressed. Exactly.
Yep. So big fan of staging. If it's a truly vacant home, that staging can go a long way, even versus doing other updates to the home, because the stagers that we use, they do a really great job of matching the furnishings to the space, and that helps the space feel more modern and updated and trendy, to create that emotional connection. For homes that are owner occupied, we still use stagers, but it's more on a consultation base to how do we best leverage the furniture that the owners of the home already possess. Usually it's a lot of decluttering and what to move out of the house so that we really maximize the space while still making it livable in the owner occupied situation. But it's definitely a big part of the prep. So going through the defensive moves, going through the offensive moves, recommending staging. And then of course that doesn't get into any of the like media and marketing kind of stuff that we do, but that's a whole nother episode for another time. Any other thoughts to bring us home here?
I think we've gone through it thoroughly. I think the as always, the main recommendation is push your agent a little bit. Make sure they're thinking about these things. Think about them yourself as you're getting ready to list. If you're in Clark County, give us a call.
Absolutely. Links in the show notes below. Be sure to subscribe to the show if you know somebody thinking about buying or selling and think they'd be a good fit. Share this with them. We'd love to connect. We'll catch you in the next one.